Hello and welcome to Finextra TV. I'm Hannah Wallace and we're here at Cybos 2019 in London. Kindly joining me now in the studio to talk about real-time and instant payments is Vinay Prabhakar, Vice President of Product Management at Volante. Hello Vinay, it's lovely to see you again.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. This is a really big topic and stirring a lot of discussion at this year's Cybos. But to sort of set the scene for us, could you tell us what are some of the latest developments around real-time and instant payments?
You know, it's hard to know where to start.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in real-time and instant payments. If we look at just what's happening in Europe, let's say, one of the largest markets for payments, we now have, this is the first Cybos where we've had both TIPS and RT1 live, and they're transacting. In the US, the clearinghouse has been live for about 2 years now. And all over the world, real-time instant payment infrastructures are transforming. If you look at Canada, Canada is creating a new RTR, real-time payments infrastructure. Australia is up and running with NPP. And older infrastructures are being reinvented. So if we look at what's going on in the UK with NPA and faster payments, it's just one of many, many examples. South Africa, I could add one country after the other. Now those are all domestic examples, but you look at cross-border instant, which 5 years ago didn't mean anything, and now it does. You look at what Swift, Visa B2B Connect, MasterCard VocaLink are doing in that area. It's very exciting because all over the world you see this trend towards making payments faster and easier to consume. So it's an exciting time to be in payments.
It certainly is. So those are the developments. Now let's move on to what some of the opportunities are we're seeing around instant and real-time.
So one of the interesting things that's going on in terms of the opportunity is what's happening around the price of real-time payments. So when real-time payments started in almost each market, you look at the US where the first real-time payments, this was even before TCH, were priced at multiple dollars per payment, or Singapore, same thing. But those prices are going down. To the prices the banks are charging are now in the tens or 20 cent region. And what the networks are charging to banks to transact these payments is fractions of a cent. In fact, in Europe, TIPS is actually charging or not charging at all for the next 2 years. So instant payments going through TIPS are going to be entirely free to banks. And what that means is that the cost of these things is going down. The industry is trying to drive the cost down so that there will be greater adoption of real-time payments by banks large and small. The problem is that larger banks have the resources, they have the budgets to invest in this, right? And they've done so. You look at banks like Bank of New York Mellon in the US, they wanted to be first with real-time payments in the US, and indeed, we helped them transact the first US TCH RTP. But they could do that because as innovators, they didn't have to worry about too much about a business case, about what products they would build on it. They could say, we want to be first into market. But that's not yet an option for the smaller banks who are still struggling with business case, cost, and the many unknowns that come with instant payments.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about that and following on from it. How is Volante placed to help banks get on board with instant and real-time? And what's the sort of outlook for the future?
Yeah. So we have a couple of fundamental beliefs. One is that eventually payments will be real-time, meaning that the majority of payments will be real-time payments. And whether as consumers or businesses, we will be accustomed to that. That will be the norm. The other is that the future of payment processing is in the cloud, right? Managed services in the cloud. That is how banks will be providing payment services. At Volante, we've been doing both of these for many years. And what we're doing to make this really easy for banks of all sizes is actually offering our real-time instant payment service on the cloud as a free service. Now, when we say free, we really do mean free. For the first 3 years, there are no service fees, there are no transaction fees up to a reasonable limit, and there are actually no onboarding or professional services fees. So we're taking the cost factor, at least the vendor or provider cost factor, out of the equation. We're also taking the time factor out of the equation. Traditionally, real-time payments implementations have been lengthy, costly processes. They take many months, sometimes over a year for many banks. we can onboard a bank onto our service in 60 days or less. So we can't take all the cost out of the equation. Banks still have their own internal costs to deal with, but in terms of total cost of ownership for a bank, we're driving that down by making these very short configuration-based projects and ensuring that, unless banks are making money, which they will do eventually, we're not charging them anything. And we hope that over time, that will increase the adoption of real-time and instant payments across the industry, which will be good for all of us, consumers, businesses, and financial institutions.
Well, that's certainly ending on a positive note there, and some really exciting work you're doing at Volante. Vinay, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thanks so much for having us.